Hello, welcome to the channel. In this video, I'll show you how to set up a secure Modbus TCP communication link between two or more devices using the Cisco ASA 5500 firewall. So let's get started. Before we begin the configuration of the network firewall, it is important to have a good understanding of the network topology. Originally, these three devices were connected to a single network switch, and device C would fetch information from device A and B utilizing Modbus TCP. The customer requested to segregate these devices into two separate networks connected via a firewall, so that device C could continue to fetch data from device A and B, but only through Modbus TCP, and all other applications and ports would be blocked. In addition to understanding the network topology, it is important to gather input information about the devices, the physical network, the communication port utilized by the devices using Modbus TCP, as well as the subnet that each one of these devices resides in, because depending on these details, the configuration of the firewall may vary. In addition to the network topology and network subnet details, it is important to make a list of all the settings that we're going to have to configure in a Cisco firewall before we can put our hands on it. So, one of the things that we're going to establish is the mode of operation. The mode of operation needs to be transparent because all of the devices are in the same subnet and no routing is available. We have to identify which ports are being utilized in the firewall. We have to define the VLANs that we're going to use and to which zones they're going to be associated. We have to define the security levels for each one of the zones. And finally, we have to configure the access control list with its associated access control entry as part of our configuration. Now that we have gathered all the information necessary from the network topology and firewall configuration requirements, we can begin hands-on with the configuration of the device. In my case, I am assuming that you have access to the device and you have the proper user rights. I will be connected through the serial port using the PuTTY terminal. So the first thing is to go to the configuration terminal of the device and verify the current firewall operating mode. So we can do show firewall, and it's currently configured as a router. We need to change that to transparent. And in transparent mode, we utilize something called bridge group virtual interfaces to do the connection across zones. So we execute the command interface BVI1, and I selected 1, but this number you can change it to whatever you need. And the bridge interface needs to have an IP address 192.168.1.1, 255.255.255.0. This IP address must belong to the same subnet as the devices that you're trying to communicate. And now that we have the BBI, we need to associate the VLANs with the bridge group. So we're going to begin with interface VLAN 1, and we got to give it a name. This is going to be our trusted zone, so I'm going to call it inside. By default, it gets the highest security level of 100, and we're going to associate it with the bridge group that we just created. Now let me go one level above and enter interface VLAN 2. This interface will be the outside zone, and by default it gets security level 0. It is worth mentioning that any packets originating from a lower level zone are blocked when they are going to a higher level security level zone. and we associate it with the bridge group 1. Now that we have both VLANs configured, it is time to associate the Ethernet ports on the firewall. And I always like to go back one level just to keep things organized for me, but you don't have to. Ethernet port 1, and this belongs to VLAN 1. So I do switch port access VLAN 1, and I will enable it, no shutdown. Now we can go to the Ethernet interface 5 and switch port access VLAN 2, and no shutdown. Let's go up one level and then verify the VLAN configuration. So we have 1 and 2. And right here, before I start getting into the access control list and the access control entry, let me open up the Modbus server that we'll be utilizing during this session. And I will be utilizing top server version 6. And I have a PLC connected here that has the following IP address. So you see 192.168.1.3, and this PLC is the one connected to port 1 on the firewall on that side of the network. And let's just verify real quick the communication between the two devices. And give it a while. Okay, so currently the communication shows as bad. So let's go ahead and let me move this over here and configure the access list. And I'm going to name it ModbusTCP outside in, because this is the outside zone sending packets into the inside zone. And it's of type extended, and we're gonna do permit TCP communication from host 192.168.1.2, which is the top server, to host 192.168.1.3 on port 502, which is our PLC. And then we can hit enter. So the next step is to add the access list to something called an access group. To do that, we do access group and then ModbusTCP outside in, and we specify that this is to allow incoming packets to that interface, and that the interface is going to be outside. We hit enter, and now you can see that the communication went from bad to good in our firewall, which means that our communication is successfully established. If you need to add additional IP addresses for additional PLCs that you want to communicate with, then you have to add those entries to the corresponding access list. And if the access list is a different one from what you already have, or you require a different access group, then you're going to have to add that as well. So this does it for the configuration. Let's move on to the next section. In this last section, I just want to show you how we can verify that no other communication is possible even though the ModbusTCP communication has been established. For This example, I'm going to be utilizing a simple ping command from the top server, which is node 192.168.1.2 to the PLC, which is on 192.168.1.3. And the ping is timing out, and I'll just go ahead and simulate some values on the PLC to demonstrate that the communication has been fully established. And that does it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoy it and find it useful. Thank you very much.